Now, what I want everyone to do is I want everyone to take off one of your shoes. Just take off one shoe quick as you can. Very quick. Just pull it off. Any foot, doesn't matter. Come on, people, slip off your shoe. Very quick. Now I want you to get that shoe. I want you to pass it along to the person next to you. Just on the floor. Just on the floor. They don't have to touch it or anything like that. Everybody should have someone else's shoe in front of them right now. So, how do you feel about putting that shoe on? Don't have to do it. I'm not saying do it. Now, put all things aside like foot and mouth disease, germs, sweat. So put all those things out of your mind. How do you feel about putting that shoe on? Put your hand up if it's a strong no. Yeah, most people, it's a strong no. Mostly, if you look at it, it's not going to fit your foot. Now, I would like to see Justin in stilettos, but that's just another matter. So just pop your shoe back to the person, slip your foot back in. Probably it's not your fit, it's not your style, and really, we don't really want to put anyone else's shoes on. That's the truth. Wouldn't it be great if our clothes or our shoes were made just for us? If they were actually designed, made exactly to our shape, exactly to our size, even though our size might be expanding or contracting or getting taller or shorter. Wouldn't it be great if our clothes were actually tailor-made? Tailor-made means it's actually purposefully made for a particular person, custom-made. Now, if clothes are not your thing, you might like to have a custom-made car. You might like to have a custom-made sports team. You might like to have a custom-made instrument. Tell the person next to you what's one thing that you would love to have custom-made for you. 1 minute. Everybody's got something that they want to have custom-made. Any surprises? I think I heard someone say a house, did I? Custom-made house, come on. That's way more than just a custom-made shoe. That's ambitious. Mm-hmm. Do you mean the ones that you eat, like wedges? Yeah, I would like custom-made wedges too, sour cream. There's a few things I like. Now, this morning we're going to read the story of David and Goliath, and it's in 1 Samuel, verse 17, so I'll get you to open up. Now, I absolutely love this story, and we love reading this story in kids' ministry because kids love to hear about a little person, a young person who beats the giant with a little stone. Kids absolutely love that story, and we're not going to talk about that part today. It's a really rich story, and I know that you'll be reflecting on it this week with your impact groups. So go with me today. Page 183 for our purple Bibles. 1 Samuel 17. Oh, gosh. Or whatever page in your own Bible, if you have one. So, now the Philistines gathered their armies for battle. They were gathered at Soko, which belongs to Judah, and encamped between Soko and Azekah in Ephes Dammim. Great name so far. Saul and the Israelites gathered and encamped in the valley of Elah and formed ranks against the Philistines. The Philistines stood on the mountain on the one side, and Israel stood on the mountain on the other side with a valley between. So we'll just pause there for a minute and picture that there's a mountain with the Israelites, there's a mountain with the Philistines, and they both want to take the land of the other. So that's where we're starting off. And there came out from the camp of the Philistines a champion named Goliath of Gath, whose height was 6 cubits and a span. We don't really understand what 6 cubits and a span is, but we're saying he was a really tall guy. He had a helmet of bronze on his head, and he was armed with a coat of mail. The weight of the coat was 5,000 shekels of bronze. He had greaves of bronze on his legs and a javelin of bronze slung between his shoulders. The shaft of his spear was like a weaver's beam, and his spear's head weighed 600 shekels of iron, and his shield bearer went before him. He stood and shouted to the ranks of Israel, "Why have you come out to draw up for battle? I am not a Philistine, and you are not servants of Saul. Choose a man for yourselves and let him come down to me." So this one man just stood out from the crowd and called out to all of the rest and said, "Get one of your men to represent you and send him down to me." So choose a man for yourselves and let him come down to me. If he is able to fight with me and kill me, then we will be your servants. But if I prevail against him and kill him, then you shall be our servants and serve us. And the Philistines said, "Today I defy the ranks of Israel. Give me a man that we might fight together." So I wanted to get a couple of volunteers. Can I get Adam for a minute? I want to get Adam to volunteer. And I want to get Janina. Thank you for volunteering. So can I just get Adam just come stand over this side, and can Janina to come and just stand here with me, please? You can come over this side, Adam. So this is kind of what we've got. We've got Adam on his mountain with the Philistines, and you've got Janina on her mountain with the Israelites. And then you get this giant man with full armor coming down the mountain and saying, where is your man? If you can beat us, we'll be your servants. And if we beat you, you are our servants. This is just a little picture. Now fight, you two. No. Only kidding. Give them a round of applause. Thank you for coming up today. So you can imagine that was quite a frightening thing that happened. Nobody actually wanted to come down. They sort of found it easier to have one man on one man. It saved the energy of everybody else. But the person that came down was a giant. And everybody else just stood and said, I'm not going to be the guy. I'm not going to stand up to him. He's a giant and he's got full armor. He's really angry. He really hates us. So nobody stood up. So when Saul and Israel heard these words of the Philistine, they were dismayed and greatly afraid. I mean, I think dismayed is probably underplaying it, don't you? Dismayed just doesn't seem anxious enough. I get dismayed if, I can't find my other shoe, for instance. That's dismay. But if I'm faced with a giant that wants to kill me, that's not dismay. Now, David was the son of Ephrathite of Bethlehem in Judah, named Jesse, who had 8 sons. That's David's father. In the days of Saul, the man was already old and advanced in years. The 3 eldest sons of Jesse had followed Saul to the battle. The names of his 3 sons who went to the battle were Eliab, the firstborn, and next to him, Abinadab. I think Abinadab's a great name, don't you? Abinadab. And the third, Shammah. Shammah's quite good too. Could make a TV show about that. David was the youngest. The 3 eldest followed Saul, but David went back and forth from Saul to feed his father's sheep at Bethlehem. So literally David was the younger brother, but he was a responsible young person in the family, and he would go between his brothers, feeding them, bringing them food, and going back to the sheep and taking care of the sheep. Even as a young man, David was very responsible. So Jesse said to his son David, "Take for your brothers an ephah of this parched grain and these 10 loaves, and carry them quickly to the camp to your brothers. Also take these 10 cheeses to the commander of their 1,000 cheeses." Good story. "See how your brothers fare and bring some token from them." Now Saul and they and all the men of Israel were in the valley of Elah fighting with the Philistines. David rose early in the morning, left the sheep with the keeper, took the provisions, and went as Jesse had commanded him. He came to the encampment as the army was going forth to the battle line, shouting the war cry. Israel and the Philistines drew up for battle, army against army. David left the things in the charge of the keeper of the baggage, ran to the ranks, and went and greeted his brothers. As he talked with them, the champion, he's even called the champion, which is, I don't know, there should be more than dismay when you're faced with the champion. The Philistine of Gath, Goliath by name, came up out of the ranks of the Philistines and spoke the same words as before, and David heard him. I'm pretty sure everyone heard him. Everyone could hear him, but I think what they're emphasizing is David heard him. You know, sometimes you hear something on a deeper level that you cannot ignore. Now all the Israelites, when they saw the man, fled from him and were very much afraid. And I think that's more real. That's not dismay, that's terror, and I think that's real. The Israelites said, "Have you seen this man who has come up? Surely he has come up to defy Israel. The king will greatly enrich the man who kills him and will give him his daughter and make his family free in Israel." David said to the men who stood by him, "What shall be done for the man who kills the Philistine and takes away the reproach from Israel? For who is this uncircumcised Philistine that he should defy the armies of the living God?" The people answered him in the same way, so shall it be done for the man who kills him." His eldest brother Eliab heard him talking to the men, and Eliab's anger was kindled against David. He said, "Why have you come down? With whom have you left those sheep in the wilderness? I know your presumption and the evil of your heart, for you have come down just to see the battle." David said, "What have I done now?" It was only a question. He turned away from him toward another and spoke in the same way, and the people answered him again as before. When the words that David spoke were heard, they repeated them before Saul, and he sent for him. David said to Saul, "Let no one's heart fail because of him. Your servant will go and fight with the Philistine." Saul said to David, "You are not able to go against this Philistine to fight with him, for you are just a boy, and he has been a warrior from his youth." But David said to Saul, "Your servant used to keep sheep for his father, and whenever a lion or a bear came and took a lamb from the flock, I went after it and struck it down, rescuing the lamb from its mouth. And if it turned against me, I would catch it by the jaw, strike it down, and kill it. Your servant has killed both lions and bears." So David's letting him know, I'm not just a boy. I've killed. I understand what that is. Your servant has killed both lions and bears, and this uncircumcised Philistine shall be like one of them, since he has defied the armies of the living God. David said, "The Lord who saved me from the paw of the lion and from the paw of the bear will save me from the hand of this Philistine." Saul said to David, "Go, and may the Lord be with you." Saul clothed David with his armor. He put a bronze helmet on his head and clothed him with a coat of mail. David strapped Saul's sword over the armor, and he tried in vain to walk, for he was not used to them. Then David said to Saul, "I cannot walk with these, for I am not used to them." So David removed them. Then he took his staff in his hand and chose 5 smooth stones from the wadi and put them in his shepherd's bag in the pouch. His sling was in his hand, and he drew near to the Philistine. The Philistine came on and drew near to David, and his shield bearer in front of him. When the Philistine looked and saw David, he disdained him, for he was only a youth, ruddy and handsome in appearance. The Philistine said to David, "Am I a dog, that you come to me with sticks?" And the Philistine cursed David by his gods. The Philistine said to David, "Come to me, and I will give your flesh to the birds of the air and to the wild animals of the field." So they're having a little fight beforehand, a little verbal fight before the actual battle. But David said to the Philistine, "You come to me with your sword and spear and javelin, but I come to you in the name of the Lord of hosts, the God of the armies of Israel, whom you have defiled. This very day the Lord will deliver you into my hand, and I will strike you down and cut off your head, and I will give the dead bodies of the Philistines' army this very day to the birds of the air and to the wild animals of the earth, so that all the earth may know that there is a God in Israel, and that all this assembly may know that the Lord does not save by sword and spear, for the battle is the Lord's, and he will give you into our hand." When the Philistine drew near to David, David ran quickly towards the battle line to meet the Philistine. David put his hand in his bag and took out a stone, slung it, and struck the Philistine on the forehead. The stone sank into his forehead, and he fell face down on the ground. So David prevailed over the Philistine with a sling and a stone, striking down the Philistine and killing him. There was no sword in David's hand. And then David ran and stood over the Philistine. He grasped his sword, drew it out into his sheath, and killed him. Then he cut off his head with it. When the Philistines saw that their champion was dead, they fled. I'm just going to ask you to just turn your eyes to the screen for one moment, and we'll go on. Now, Hollywood, of course, are allowed to change a few things. They didn't quite. We've just heard the story. That was what they did. But I wanted to just show you how intimidating it was when they do battle in those days. It was hand-to-hand battle. They were quite close to each other, not like now where you see, the two sides don't necessarily see each other. They can kill from a long way away. Then their battle was hand on hand. They were right on top of each other. It would have just been so intimidating and frightening for David, but how brave he was. But at that moment, David wasn't really representing himself. Okay, he wasn't actually representing his family. He was representing God. If you heard what the Philistines said, "Where is your God now?" They were just blatantly laughing at the faith of the Israelites. So David was taking God with him to battle on God's behalf. Now, there's just so much to that story, and I know it's a really dense story. You can talk about it more in your impact groups. But the bit I really wanted to talk about this morning, verses 38 and 39, Saul clothed David with his armour. He put a bronze helmet on his head. He clothed him with a coat of mail. David straps Saul's sword over the armour, and he tried in vain to walk, for he was not used to them. Then David said to Saul, "I cannot walk with these, for I am not used to them." And so David removed them. Now I think any parents or any kids can imagine this scene, because as a kid you might have done it, I've done it. As a parent, my kids have done it. It's the middle of winter, it's freezing cold, and they are walking out the door in a very brief, summery outfit, walking out into the freezing wintry night. And I'll say, "Do you think you need a jacket?" And they'll be like, "No." And they would rather die than wear that jacket and spoil their outfit. They'd rather freeze to death. Now, I've been on both sides of that, but I can see that Saul is giving his armour, and David is saying, "No." And Saul would have been, "Well, okay, but you get the consequences. I think as parents, sometimes we just say, okay, don't wear the jacket, but I know you'll be freezing. You won't admit it, but that's the consequences. The armour would have made him look bigger, would have made him look stronger, and he would have been just so much more acceptable to the enemy. But David knew it didn't fit him. He wouldn't be able to move, and he decided not to wear it. He was just trusting God more than that armour that he didn't know. But anyhow, he did make a choice. He made a choice to be more vulnerable without the armour, and he also made the choice to be a laughingstock. They just laughed at him. You don't even have armour. You're a boy with no armour, yet you would face a man with armour. Let me ask you, today, are you wearing some things that are not intended for you? How many of us live lives that are so far beneath what God has called us to? Because we wear shoes that don't fit us, an attitude, a lifestyle that was never intended for us. How many of us wear tags that have been given to us by our parents, by our workmates, by our friends, or by families? Like, you're too dumb, you're too sensitive, you're too loud, you're too scared, you're too risky, you're too smart, you're too lazy, you're too much of a dreamer, you are too... I know you can all fill in the blanks. You are too much something for someone. There might have been people in our lives that have, if you like, suited us up, and now we can't think anything differently from what they've told us, for fear that we might disappoint them, or worse by far is that we believe the tags and the things that people have put on us to wear. Now, I think that David would have been uncomfortable in saying no to that armour from Saul. But maybe sometimes we need to be willing to be uncomfortable so that we can do something more, so that we can step into what God's called us to be. The fact is, God might call us to change our livelihood, our job. But he will call us to change our lifestyle. He will call us to change our attitude, so that we could follow Christ more, so that we could help other people to change their lives. We, this group of people, we're a group of proclaimers. Proclaimers change lives. But for that to happen, we need to take the first look at ourselves. God is always connecting us with right people so that we can do the thing that he wants us to do. But sometimes as he's manoeuvring us into place, we're the one that is saying, I can't move in this thing. I can't be a good parent. I don't want to be a teacher or a bus driver or a lawyer. I can't study. I'm too old. I'm too young. I'm too busy. I won't be able to do that. David said, I cannot walk with these, for I am not used to them. What tags have you attached to yourself that you might need to step away from today and say, I cannot walk with these things? Whatever it is that we're called to be or to do, we have to rock that in our own way to fulfill that destiny or that calling, that God's purpose on us. We have to look at ourselves and rock that thing that God has put in us. We're the only ones who can. Right now, your tailor-made purpose is in your heart, waiting for you to work it out. Now, sometimes we just have to get bold. We have to come to know who we are. You don't want to wait until you're 50, 60, 70 years old and look back and say, I should have, I could have, I didn't. I want to encourage you today to stand firm in what you believe God has put on your heart. Now, some of you might say, I don't know what that is. I've never known what it is. take the time. Sit with God, sit in his presence, and just say, what is your purpose for me? I know you have purpose for me. What is my purpose? The clothes that fit best are the ones that God provides. That would be your unique gifts, your talents, your abilities, the things that God places on your heart. Are you bold enough to change, to start living out the gifts that God's placed in you today? Our great God and Saviour knows everything. He is everywhere and he is all-powerful. The Lord God knows me because he made me, and since he made me, I am responsible for my actions. Now, if you're writing notes, I want you to write down Psalm 139 from chapter 13. And this psalm is written by David. The thing I love about the Psalms is they are so emotional. You can read Psalms where people are grumpy, angry, furious, sad, mad, happy, joyful, jubilant, triumphant. You can read all of those things in the Psalms. Now, this one today is David's talking to God, saying, God, you formed my inward parts. You wove me in my You wove me in my mother's womb. There isn't another person on the face of this earth with the same genes, with the same DNA, with the same chromosomes. I am unique, custom made by God for a specific purpose in history right now today. There's nobody on the earth right now who can fulfill the purpose that God has given you. God's dealings with you and me are not a duplicate of his dealings with anyone else in the world. It's completely unique. I am unique. You are unique. There is no one like you. We do not trust God sometimes when we want to be like someone else. Have you ever wanted to be like someone else? You've wished you could do something they could do. You wish you said something they said. That's God's purpose for them. You are not inferior or superior because you're not doing the same as anybody else. Because we need to thank God for who we are, not look to that other person and how great they are. Celebrate how great they are, but they are not us. The psalm says, I will give thanks to you, for I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Wonderful are your works, and my soul knows it very well. Have you thanked God for who you are? So when you're sitting with God in his presence and you're saying, God, what's your purpose for me? Just thank him for how wonderfully he's made you. For the gifts he's given just you, the talents he's given just you. My frame are not hidden from you. When I was made in secret and skillfully wrought in the depths of the earth, your eyes have seen my unformed substance, and in your book were all written the days that were ordained for me, when as yet there was not one of them. I worship a God who knows me and is near me and created me for today. There's only one me. I'm a pattern that God will never use again. In all of time, there's never going to be another me. I'm somebody. I am a unique creation of God. My responsibility is not to seek the praise of another person, but just to be what God has made me. Have you spent time thinking of who you are in God's eyes? We should thank God for just how he's made us so amazingly complex. I want you to remember, you have been tailor-made by God. He has designed you for a purpose. And if you don't know that purpose, it is okay, but it is okay to ask and keep on asking, because he will unfold it for you. Like David, you've been handed sometimes a suit of armor that is not from God. And now is a time to step away, to step up, or to step towards what God design is for you. Sometimes we just say, well, I'm a Christian, that's enough. But coming to know Christ more and more and becoming more like him, that's the path of the Christian. Becoming a Christian, it's not that hard. Or saying you're a Christian, not that hard, not that impressive. Working towards coming to know Christ more and knowing what your purpose is, that's your path. That's what you're designed for. You're fearfully and wonderfully made. You're enough. Tell yourself, I am enough. God has made me. I am enough. David knew that he was enough. He had no armor. He didn't have a sword. He was tiny. He was a boy. He was laughed at and scorned. But he stood and said, I'm enough. I don't need that. I've got God. That makes it enough. I'm going to ask you to stand up now as we just move forward. We're going to worship God and just thank God for Tailor making us. We are one of a kind. We're custom made. We have purpose. We are unique. We are not what others have labelled us. Or we are just God's custom-made person with his purpose written in our DNA. Thank you, Jesus. Thank you. Holy Spirit, come.